Hello and welcome to our latest episode of the Kip and Kin podcast, Stories from the Hospitality Industry. I'm really happy to welcome Rob here today to tell us all about the ups and downs that have brought him to where he is today, and of course, what makes the hospitality industry so special. So hi, thanks for coming and joining me with this conversation. So can we just start with an introduction to who you are and what you do?
Hi, Cassie. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm really happy to be here. My name's Rob. I guess I'd say I'm an ex-publican now, but I'm sure I'll fall back into that role again at some point. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to launch a design business. So we specialize in helping hospitality businesses look great and communicate their message directly to their customers.
Fantastic. So do you want to start by telling me your story? How did you get to there and from where?
Okay, so I'm fourth generation publican, so I've grown up around pubs. My granddad's pub is probably my earliest memory. Actually, a specific memory is my Uncle Mick hanging out of the window from the country pub. So my family are a bit of a bunch of country pub bumpkins, so that's what the pub was all about. You imagine a brace of pheasant at the end of the bar, muddy wellies all around the place. So I was exposed to hospitality when I was quite young, but to be honest, it took me a long time to really consider it as a career option. It was something to help me through college and those things. But I think my first real taste of taking it seriously, I think you'd probably say, was actually in a hotel in Brighton. So I got a job for working nights at the Old Ship Hotel in Brighton, which is famed to be the most haunted hotel in Brighton. It's now on the seafront, but the original pictures of it, strangely, it's actually inland a little bit. So the sea's reclaimed some of that land. But I was 21 years old, and as a night porter, I went up to night manager pretty much immediately and was in charge of a 152 bedroom hotel. Went behind the ears and really out of my depth, if I'm honest. But I think that was my real taste of running the show to some degree. It wasn't my hotel, obviously, and it was a minor role in the whole scheme of things. But for a 21-year-old person, it really stretched me. So from there, obviously working nights wasn't ideal. I was working 7 till 7, I think it was. I used to work all night. So I swiftly sort of looked around, got jobs in bars, worked from bar to bar. And then it just became apparent that I wanted to run my own business. So running my own pub would be the next step.
How old were you then?
Early 20s, mid 20s. It did take me a long time till I really managed to get my own pub as such. But what really happened is I started working for a pub company in Brighton. And from there, I was luckily headhunted for a bigger pub company in Brighton who are now called Lane. And they were extremely good to me. I hold that company quite close to my heart because that's where I really started my career from. So working as a managing partner there, I was able to work as many hours as I could, basically, to save the money, live on site. I just saved every penny I've got. And then when I got to around 30, I had enough money then to start looking for my own pub.
So where did you get? Was that in Brighton as well that you went and started your own pub?
It was in Brighton, yeah. So we the pub that I took on was called The Geese, and I drank in there for a few years, and I knew the place very well, and it was right in the area that I wanted it to be. But also, like many publicans, that if you're running on a budget and you're young, inevitably you're going to take on a pub that needs some work, that needs rebuilding. Yeah. And for me, that was perfect. I'd done that before working for other pub companies, and we had such a proven track record at the pub I was running for Lane that we could take on a new pub and pretty much arrive with a product with a proven formula. So we were the Bangers and Mash pub. When we took it on, we launched with 10 different flavors of sausage, mash, and gravy. So it's like a mix and match. Brightonians will know it very well. It's quite a famous pub now. So our whole USP was the Bangers and Mash, and the other side of it was something, I don't know if you know Brighton very well, but it's got a massive roast scene there. The Sunday roasts are the big thing. So the one thing that was a problem working in hospitality, and Brighton is one of those cities that, hospitality is probably its biggest industry. you work in a pub, you work all day and you're loving it. It's a great vibe. You finish and you think, I want to get stuck in and do the same thing. And everywhere's run out of roasts. So you gather your mates together. They've all had a lovely day. So at the Geese, that was one of our USPs. We were like, right, let's cater to hospitality and pubs as well. And so we started doing roasts till 10 o'clock at night and we killed it. We just absolutely smashed it. We were rammed. We won awards for the roasts. And, it was hard work, but we had a fantastic team there and we smashed it. Yeah. Put the Geese on the map.
Fantastic. So, but what happened? Because I sense that that's not the end of that story.
Well, there was 10. I was at the Geese for 10 years, and in the 10 years, we won Best Roast in Brighton 3 times. We won Best Local twice as well. But to be honest, I think a lot of people would have a similar story. So it was going very well, fantastic. Money's in the bank. We've got a great team. Everyone's getting on well, the product's perfect, and then lockdown, pandemic. So for me, it was like an off switch. It was literally like night and day. I don't know if you can remember that Friday when everyone seemed to have the tellies on in the pubs and we were all glued to the TV, literally had the pub on. The local vicar was in the pub, my staff were there. And we were just waiting for that announcement on that Friday. And that announcement came, right, you've got to shut up your pub. And I did expect it, but I was still kind of shell-shocked. And, I think the pressure hit immediately. Some of my staff understood, how big that was for all of us. And some staff immediately came to me and asked me, so what does that mean for me? What are you still going to pay me? All the questions that I couldn't answer at that time. So that was kind of my first taste of what was to come for the next year or two, was the unknown. People asking you questions, like in the streets, oh, when are you going to open? I don't know.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of I don't knows going on. I think that was on the Friday, and the Saturday morning I was then on my own above my shutdown business with a cellar full of beer, fridges full of sausages, and really no clue what to do next.
My situation during lockdown was that actually my businesses I'd ceased trading in my businesses a couple of months beforehand. So actually when it happened, for the first time in 25 years, I wasn't an operator. But I remember watching the TV and just going, what? How? That's not possible. How can that possibly happen? How can we live in a world where this is going to happen? Because in my businesses that I had been operating, I know that we probably, because of the nature of these small hospitality businesses, I knew that we probably only had 3 weeks worth of cash that would get us through. And that actually, if you didn't trade for 3 weeks, that there was no way of getting through it. And so I remember looking at the TV going, what? You can't just say we're closing and that being the end of it. So I can't imagine how that was. I don't know what I would have done. I remember just looking at everyone in awe going, how are you managing this? How did you manage it?
Well, I didn't. I think I didn't would be the honest answer to that. I think it's funny to backtrack just a little bit. I actually remember having the conversation with people years ago about how bulletproof pub industry was. If things are bad, people go to the pub. If things are good, they go to the pub. So, what have we got to worry about? And who could have foreseen this happening? And incidentally, one of the first cases for COVID was a regular in my pub. So, who'd been in China, so it was on the news and things like that. But yeah, I think the answer to that is I didn't cope very well at all. I was, the one thing that kept me going was my fitness. I'd always been an avid cyclist, so the roads were quiet and I could go out and do that. But with regards to financially, my assumption was that was it. At some point I'm going to be packing up and figuring out what else I'm going to do with my life. So I had there was a lot of sobbing, I'll be honest. There was a lot of sobbing going on, a lot of not knowing, and the feeling of isolation was the worst because I'd always prided myself on doing everything myself. And, I had assistant managers, but I ran the business myself. I didn't have, a partner or anybody really to lean on. And being single at that time, locked above my shutdown business, really wasn't great, especially when you switch on the TV and, the BBC are reporting how we're all in it together, all of this, and you just feel isolated. That's how I felt anyway. I just felt isolated, and I've never felt less together than at that moment or at that time.
And I know that when people look back at lockdown now and they go, "Oh, pub industry, it did, did this," and you're like going, "Yeah, but if you were in it in that moment, nobody orchestrated how it was best to run your pub in that. Nobody knew that, until you got the announcement that furlough was coming, you didn't know how to handle that. You didn't know how to handle it. What do you do with all your stock? Nobody was giving advice on that. It was every individual doing it, and all of you heard, after we were all hearing all the great news stories that were coming from the pub industry, where people were, I don't know, whatever it is inventive thing that they had come up with, but they were small. It was only a few people that were doing that. Everyone else was in your position, which was like, just feeling it in real terms as it was happening, and not knowing what was going to happen next. That level of uncertainty. Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it was just me. There was a lot of people in the same situation, but there was a real divide, I think, between being an employee in that situation and being the employer. Because what people didn't seem to understand is if I was a designer like I'm doing now, I would have been shut down and I wouldn't have had a great deal of overheads. But I got shut down and I still had to pay all my rent. I had the rent on a massive pub to pay. And, I had thousands of pounds worth of stock. So at first we were, like anybody, scrabbling around thinking, what can we do? Let's do takeaway roasts. And then you swiftly realise that paying a chef to come in, on 15, 20 quid an hour is not going to work when you're doing a few takeaway roasts. So what I did eventually was I launched my own business selling roast sandwiches, like brisket and pork sandwiches, crackling in them. Because I've got a stable door on my kitchen, I could sell them straight out of my pub to my neighbours, and they were very helpful. People came along and they went down a storm. But, I was selling sandwiches out of a business that was, you wouldn't sell sandwiches out of usually because it wouldn't make any business sense. So despite the fact that I was then working doing that, I was still losing an awful amount of money. It was batten down the hatches as best you can. But the one thing I do remember is I had to tip away my beer because, I actually don't drink, but I did decide at the time to keep my social media up. I'll have a pint every day. And there was only so long I could keep that up for as well. And so when I had to tip my beer away, which we had this specific slots that you all had to tip your beer away, it took me 12 hours of solid pouring beer away, and that was pretty soul destroying, really. And much of it was out of date then, so I couldn't really give it away or anything. So,
and also, you'll know how much every single one of those barrels you're tipping away, you knew how much you were tipping away. I mean, when you've had to throw away old beer just because it's gone out of date, whatever, it hurts anyway. But when you're doing it on that scale, you're doing it on that scale,
and it's coming up your plug holes in your bathroom and your kitchen. And, there was I think I had nightmares of that, like creeping under my bedroom door at night and attacking me. So, yeah, I mean, it was it was a time of my life and it was an experience of my life. At the time, it was the worst thing that could have possibly happened.
Yeah.
But like most things, the only real way to get past these things is just to reframe it. So for now, I look back at that time, a few really positive things happened to me at that time, which enabled me to move on. I met my wife around lockdown. Luckily I had a dog, so I was able to socialize loosely. I'll admit it, I broke a few laws. I'm not scared of admitting it now, but we started dating. And then eventually, I think after noticing that I could need some support as well, she came and lived with me. One thing led to another, and we ended up having our first child just after lockdown. So, we turned things around really quickly there. So for me, it's kind of like the worst time and the best time in my life all rolled into one. So, I look back at that time I guess kind of like, the old sort of war songs where it's, it's a kind of jolly, and I'm sure there's areas of it where it was a horrific time, but there's bits of it that you'd look back with fond memories. And now I'm trying to just hold on to the fond memories of it and put that particular period of my life behind me.
Oh, so the pub went, so you no longer had the pub. What did you do after that? Because I mean, to be fair though, it's not been long. I mean, and actually, I think you need to remember this, that everyone needs to remember this, particularly for the industry, that 2020 sounds like it's 4 years ago, but actually, COVID didn't really finish till 2022. And things are only just beginning to get back to normal, or whatever it is now, we're beginning to settle now. So it's not been long, has it?
It hasn't been long, and judging by my friend group and my family, I think there's two types of people. There's people who the pandemic barely touched. I've got a friend who's a roofer who, he's never been busier, and he made an absolute fortune during that time. And then there's others of us that, just got sort of left behind with it all. So, there was an element of bitterness there that, I really struggled to leave the bitterness behind me. And one thing that really affected me during that time was a loss of a dear friend of mine who had been an employee. Initially, that's how we met, but we became very close friends, and he really was a sweet, sweet boy. But unfortunately, he took his life during lockdown, and I think he's one of the casualties of the situation, and of not being able to get the help that was there. So on one hand, that was deeply sad. Well, not on one hand, that is deeply sad, but the effect that had on me to be able to, start rebuilding and restructuring and chasing what it is that I really want to do, it was enormously helpful. And, it's so much of my life because of that, really. So what happened for me was we started trying to rebuild the pub, and I took on another pub, and we were rebuilding that one. And, I didn't have the money I used to have to buy stock and things like that with. That had all gone. My life savings had all been invested into the pub. So now it was like, I've got to make this work. And we were rebuilding, doing great. Then the energy crisis happened. So it was backtracked again. And for me, that period in some ways became worse than the lockdown period. The element of uselessness, for lack of a better word, during lockdown was in some ways liberating at some point, because you thought, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Whereas post-lockdown, my life became like a battleground. It was, the first time we wanted to fill our cellars up with beer. I couldn't get any beer because the drayman went on strike for our very first beer delivery post-lockdown, which, was a little bit of an insult. And then the energy crisis, my bills went from like £800 a month to about £4,000, which is insane. And I just started questioning things and thinking, I love this industry. I love the people. I love talking to people. I love the social aspect. Everything about hospitality is me, but it's not giving me back what I used to get. And I think the phrase, if the juice isn't worth the squeeze, then at some point you've got to do something else. So I'd retrained during lockdown as a coach. So I've been doing business coaching for people, helping people that wanted to start small businesses, helping people with lifestyle changes, and helping them with their, mental health and things like that. So initially, that's what I thought I would do. Maybe I'll start. So I started doing that on the side whilst I was still running the pub. So the pub was making decent money for my staff and for the people I buy the beer off, but not for me. So I had to do something else. So that's what I was doing to sort of pay the bills on the side. Through that, I actually got my own coach, and she did me a favour. She was a neighbour, and she saw that I was having a bit of a tough time of it, and offered to give me some free coaching. And that's when I really started to explore my options. So I'm sure plenty of people would have thought of this if they're in hospitality, is that I always thought my industry was so British centric and so specialist that I can't do anything else. What else am I going to do? And I'd forgotten that I'd studied graphic design, and I'd forgotten that I was basically the creative director for my own business. And I'd forgotten my personal skills, my running a business skills, and all of these things that I was great at. Cooking, for example, I launched a business doing roast sandwiches that everyone loved just because I had that idea. And it started to, Sarah really helped me start exploring that and thinking. And I think if anyone's listening to this and they think you're trapped doing what you do or how you do it now, the skills you learn in hospitality are second to none. There is no other industry where you can be an accountant, you can be an artist, you can be a chef, you can be a cleaner, you can be a gardener, you can be anything that you want to be, and be good at it. And that was something that I'd never seen it that way before. Backtracking a little bit, half of my family go from a design background, and half of my family are publicans. So first and foremost, I thought, right, so the pub isn't serving me the way I want it to serve me. I've got a young baby on the way and I've got a toddler at home. So what do? Do I carry on, having a battleground, being stressed out, not sleeping, or do I do something about it? And last year, the Geese won Best Local in the Bravo Awards in Brighton. So for me, it was, this is time. This is the time. Sell it, do something else. So my first port of call, I sold it last December. So last December was my first Christmas off since I was 15, I think. So from working from retail to hospitality, you know what it's like. You don't have Christmases off.
No.
So that was my first experience of having an actual Christmas. I decided to put the pub on the market and sell it. And the first step for me was to help my wife rebuild her career. So I've been being a dad pretty much full time. Sorry, it makes me a little bit emotional to talk about this.
No, it's absolutely lovely. I mean, yeah.
But I can genuinely say that it's been the best thing I've ever done. There's still worries, there's still money I've got to worry about, but having the freedom to spend that time with my children, I know that I will look back on that and just, I would have done anything to have that time. So at the time, it was a massive decision selling the pub. Now it's, so at the time it was like, I'm failing, I'm letting go of my dream. This was always my dream. I dreamt of just having a nice pub, and to sell that at the time was heartbreaking. But it really didn't take me that long to think, actually, I've got a Saturday off. This is great.
We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and also, though, the release of what other people don't understand about running a pub sometimes is and I'm sure you'll attest to this, it's open all the time. There is no time when you can't worry about your business. So whether it's you've got a day off and you're like, oh, I wonder if so-and-so's in, that person's not quite as good at that one and that, or whatever it is, there's always something. There's always a message to answer. There's always an email to answer. You go on holiday, and I'm sat on the beach talking about how to clean lines properly or whatever it is. And the release of that to be like, so my plan going forwards now is I just need some time to have a business where it's me, where it's me and I worry about me. And when my business is closed, that means I'm a dad. That means I'm at home with my family, rather than standing in the park answering a question from my staff on my phone whilst pushing my son on the swing with the other hand. So that's where I'm at now. So my next step is I'm launching my business, which is a design business. So we help build websites and graphic design and social media aimed directly at pubs and hospitality. So being in that industry, I not only understand what people would want in that industry, but also the budgets. If I'm honest, there's the budgets. I've had designer friends of mine, and my brother was one as well, but be very unrealistic about how they would charge someone in a pub, not realizing that, especially now that profits really are tight. So you've got to think about doing things differently. So that's where I'm at now. I'm looking ahead, looking forwards, and excited about the future.
Fantastic. I mean, I was going to ask you where your darkest day was, but there's been some pretty dark times in all of that. But obviously also but what you also convey is also your love of the industry and all the value that you get out of that. And it is both sides of that. So your hopes for the future, do you think you'll go back into the industry, or do you think that's you done?
Well, yes, I do. And I do have a specific dream that comes with pubs. So my family pub is called the Fox, and it's in Worcestershire. And it's a lovely little old geezer's pub, rough around the edges. No one's really done it up for years. It's got the same taxidermy on the wall from when I was a kid. So, it really is. I mean, they won't thank me for saying this, but think Royston Vasey, that kind of thing. But, I mean, if anyone's listening to this, look at the Google reviews for the Fox Monkwood Green. They've got a particular landlord there who's a character, to say the least. And, it's a lifestyle for him and for them. But at some point, I think that pub would need to be put back on the map before someone turns it into houses. So my dad still lives in that area. So hopefully at some point, maybe with some friends, we will be able to get hold of that when I'm a bit older and turn that around. So I would like to get back into the industry, but to be honest, I don't really want to leave. That's why I could try and do design and websites for everybody. But the truth is, this is my wheelhouse. This is what I know. And, this is what I love. Yeah. Speaking to people like yourself and people that have been there and understand it and have had a similar career to me, that's where I'm at the moment.
Absolutely. And it sounds just like me. I didn't want to leave the industry. I knew that being an operator, although I talk to people all the time and I go, "Oh, just one more time." But no, I keep trying to tell myself the rule is no more. but nonetheless, I couldn't leave the industry. I love it too much. And also I've got too much understanding and knowledge to just walk away with that. As you see, we all know the industry is tough, but it can be made easier by learning from other people's lessons. And I think, and your story is absolutely fantastic for that, and that understanding and your demonstration of resilience is just inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've all learned lessons over the pandemic, and I'm sure you've noticed as well that the industry at the moment has made a shift towards making it. We kind of had to, but making it more attractive for people to come into the industry to actually build a career. And for many years prior to that, I would hardly ever meet somebody that was a career publican. Most people that I met were all, were new to it, who were, maybe they're an ex-copper or an ex-builder or whatever it was, but they'd had another career or they had tried to do something else, whereas to actually choose to be in pubs wasn't necessarily the first career choice. So I'm really happy to see that, there's a concentration on improving welfare conditions for staff and to improve people's mental health. And, the charities like the Licensed Trade Charity, the LT, who I help out where I can with some fundraising, that they're there to really support people in our industry. If we want longevity in this industry, we do really need talent to remain in this industry. And not only that, for people to leave school and say, yeah, that's a great job, I'd like to do that, and to hold on to those personalities rather than doing it for a bit to get through university and then go and do something else.
Yeah, because you're right, it absolutely is a great job, but historically as an industry, we haven't looked after people as well as we could have done. And you're right, it is amazing to watch people like, as you say, the Licensed Trade Charity really have an impact on that and make a difference in that. And for the industry itself to be picking it up and to make a difference. It's definitely much better now than it's ever been in that regard.
Oh,
can you? Yeah,
absolutely.
Sorry, go on. Yeah, so
no,
can you just tell people?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just tell people how they can get hold of you.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn or you can visit my website. My business is called Lift BrandWorks. But yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn and go from there.
Fantastic. And I will put that all in the show notes. And it's been absolutely amazing to speak to you, Rob. Thank you for sharing all that and being so brutally honest, actually, about how difficult some of those times have been. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Cassie. Thanks for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure.